is Peter Parfitt, and in the next few minutes I'm going to be talking to you about water-based wood fillers made by Osmo. A few days ago, Osmo UK contacted me and asked me if I was prepared to review some of their products. So they've sent me some and I have them here. Now, I do fine woodworking and I love making boxes, and of course rarely need to use wood fillers at all, he says. In fact, I'm an expert in the subject. I don't think I've ever made anything which hasn't needed just a little touch of wood filler at some time, and so perhaps I'm the ideal guy to have a look at these products from Osmo. Now, this is how I intend to go about this. I have here a piece of maple which I've made some holes in and also made some fairly deep gouges in. And at this end there's some 10mm deep holes. It's my intention to use these for building up a layer of the product and to see whether it shrinks and cracks. Next to it are some 4mm holes, and I will use just one application of the product and then see again if it shrinks and cracks. I've got some fairly deep scratches and gouges here, and those represent sort of real life damage to a floor, a door, or whatever it might be that you're trying to fill. Then I've got some shower holes, 2mm deep and 3mm deep. My idea is that I'll try screwing a screw through the filler once it's dry and see what happens. And also I'll try machining another hole partially through the filler to see whether it can withstand that process as well. Now, Osmo in their brochure make a number of claims. First of all, they say it's easy and clean to use. Well, we'll find that out very shortly. Quick drying, it's supposed to dry within 30 minutes, but they do in the brochure recommend that you use a hairdryer or a hot air gun to speed up the process if it's required. It's supposed to be good for edge filling, using it as a wood putty. Well, with the tests we've got lined up, that will be fine. It's supposed to be non-toxic. I'm sorry, I'm not going to eat the cherry flavour, you'll just have to, or we'll just have to take Osmo's word on that. And it's supposed not to shrink and crack. Well, we've got that lined up in the various tests, and it's supposed to have an indefinite shelf life. Well, I can't test that, I'm afraid. Right, now I've opened the walnut flavour and I've started to put it down into these deep holes, and I'm using the walnut on all of these round holes here so that it shows up well against the lighter colour of the maple. I'm going to use the maple flavoured filler on these deep scratches just as a little attempt to show you how well it might blend in. I'm going to put this deep one in first because that's going to be done in 2 stages. Now, it's interesting that the walnut is a little bit thicker than the maple flavoured product, and I've got a little bit of dowel that I'm using just to push it down into these holes. And in the manufacturer's instructions, Osmo state that if you're doing a build-up of a layer like this, that you should do it in stages no more than 6mm at a time. Yeah, what's tending to happen when I'm pushing it down into a hole is that I'm able to drag it so that it's moving the whole lump away from the edges of the hole. So perhaps my test is slightly flawed. It should have been jagged edges, but we shall see. We shall see. It's actually now I'm using the maple as well. It's probably about the same consistency as the walnut, to be honest. It goes on nice and easily. Nothing wrong with that at all. So, that's it. The first lot of filler on this block has now finally dried. It certainly didn't dry naturally within 30 minutes. So I put it outside, there was a bit of warm sunshine, and it's now quite dry. That sort of thing doesn't worry me, but it's just something you need to be aware of. This will not dry naturally within 30 minutes if it's as deep as some of these holes here. I'm going to clean that up, and I'm going to then do the finish off of the filling of these two really deep holes. I took this piece of oak floorboard which had a large crack in it just here. I'm sorry I don't have a before photograph, I forgot to take one. But on the back you can see some evidence of the crack, but it was much bigger on the side that I filled. And I filled it with the medium oak, and I've then used some poly-X on it to finish off, and that's for a separate review I'm doing of Osmo stuff. And I must tell you, I hope you can see, there should be a close-up photograph that you can see, there's no real evidence of this crack having ever been there. So that's good. Some of you may remember when I was doing a demonstration of sanding, I had this piece of oak which had a huge crack in it here. You can see some evidence of it on this side where I've played around with it. I've put, for contrast, some of the walnut filler on here, and I'll be cleaning that up in a minute and we'll see what that looks like. And our test block, I've filled this. I did give it an interim sand, but then I noticed there were some little tiny bits which needed refilling, so I've done that. And one of the things I've noticed already, one of the claims that Osmo make is that this filler doesn't shrink. Well, that's perfectly true if you've got small irregular shaped holes, but the science of it is such that any filler is going to shrink a bit, because filler goes on in a soft paste form and it hardens, but by the fact, usually, unless it's an epoxy, it hardens by the fact that either water or some other chemical evaporates from it. Therefore the volume has to decrease, and therefore it's going to shrink. It's different for epoxy fillers, of course. So, and even now I can see some shrinkage from these holes here. Now, bear in mind it's not often that you would want to fill perfectly formed holes that have been drilled in wood. So this is a real tough case. Now if I tap this, there we go, that really deep one there has come out. I thought that would be the case. It just didn't look as though it was going to stay there for any length of time. And in fact what happened was, you may have heard it, I had to fill it in 2 stages, and that is the very bottom piece. The top piece is on the floor somewhere. I'll find that now. I've actually given it another tap, and another one has come out from here. Now, to be fair, this is hard maple, and when you machine it with a Forstner bit, as I've done, it produces holes with really clean, smooth sides, and so this is probably the worst test of this type of thing that you could imagine. But it does shrink, and you know, I don't think anybody can claim that their fillers don't shrink unless it's an epoxy, so maybe the test was unfair in the first place. But anyway, I'm going to sand that down and see what we can do with the other holes. Right, I've sanded that down, and that's come up quite nicely. Now I'm going to put some Osmo poly-X on this for a separate review I'm doing, but I think after I put that on I'll show it to you on this video, because I think that will come up rather well. I've already sanded this piece, and if you remember we've got the 2 missing holes here from this smooth-sided maple. Now there is another one. You can probably just make out that this has shrunk from around the edge there, but there's no evidence of any shrinking on these larger, shallower holes. So that's 2mm, 3mm, perfectly okay, and absolutely no problem with these irregular shaped holes here at all. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to try a bit of staining. I'm going to try drilling and cutting these, which I said I'd do, and we'll see what happens. I've got some spirit-based stain here, which I'm just going to do part of this just to see how it looks. I'm not expecting the maple to take the stain particularly well. I just want to see how well the filler takes it. Tissue to take the excess off, and the filler takes that perfectly well. And I might even be able to demonstrate it on. Yeah, it soaks straight in, absolutely no problem at all. And so staining this is not a problem. You would need to play around if you were doing something as drastic as I've just done, which is to use a walnut filler in a almost white wood like maple. Then you're going to have some odd effects. But I've done this really so it shows up clearly. I've put some poly-X on this. You remember we filled that, and I hope you're able to see just how lovely that looks. I think that's really, really nice. Right, you've now seen me do a number of different machining jobs here. I've used a 10mm Forstner bit to cut these holes through these pieces. I've used my mitre saw to cut a narrow trench through here. And all of these cuts are perfectly clean, and the filler is still sound on either side of the holes. And finally, you saw me drill and countersink here, and I'm going to put a screw in now, and we're going to see just how this behaves when I tighten up a screw in the hole. You've got to forgive me, I'm not very good at doing this by hand because of my wrists. There we go. There we go, nice and tight, and there's no cracking there whatsoever, and I hope you can see that well. Well, that concludes my tests on the Osmo water-based fillers, and I think you'll agree with me, the real tough tests were here on this piece of maple. The machining through this hole with the saw, it left really clean-sided holes, and I've never yet been able to do that with any of my fillers before. I have had success with other fillers putting a Forstner bit through them, but that partly depends on the quality of the Forstner bit. But this has perfect sides to these holes here. I was very impressed by the screwing a screw into the where the filler has been, and there's absolutely no cracking whatsoever, and I've never yet managed that with any of my other water-based fillers. Over here, the deep holes, there was some shrinkage which we saw, and the irregular shaped holes perfect, and of course it took stain. Now I did try putting some filler on this walnut box, and I sanded it off after I did it, and I cannot get a photograph to show you where the filler has been put. You just cannot see where the filler has gone in on this box, so that's 10 out of 10 for that. This piece of oak flooring, again, you can't see where the medium oak filler has been. I can just see it in this light, partly because I know where it is, and so that's full marks. And you saw when I put the walnut filler on this piece of rough old piece of oak, it's gone in really nicely, and it looks particularly nice now that I've put the poly-X on. My desktop, I put three little bits of filler on that, and I can't see where I put them, but it looks really nice, I must tell you. Always use a plastic spatula. I did try using a steel tool, and after a while you do get a bit of reaction between the steel and the filler, and it leaves a sort of grey stain, which does rub off with sandpaper, so it's not a great worry, but it's a bit disconcerting at the time. So use a plastic spatula. Well, that's it. I think these Osmo water-based fillers have passed the serious tests, particularly these mechanical tests which I've demonstrated there, and I wouldn't hesitate in recommending them. And I must say I'm rather pleased that I got a bit left over. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.